do you choose to accept it? Do you choose to own it? Do you choose to become a world-class CISO? Because the reality is everybody is destined to be a world-class CISO. Everyone is meant to be a world-class CISO. Everyone can be a world-class CISO, but few actually choose to decide. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome to this week's edition of Life of a CISO with yours truly, Dr. E is in the house. Woohoo! Hope you are doing awesome. Hope you are ready for another amazing episode. We're basically going to dive deep into the world of being a Chief Information Security Officer. We're going to break it down. We're going to dissect it. We're going to stack it back up. And if you've listened before, you know what my goal is. Come on, what's my goal? Let me hear it, let me hear it, let me hear it. World-class CISO, all right? If you're new, you want to be average, probably not going to last too long because I don't do average. Right? I believe in you. I see greatness in you. I know that you were born to crush it. And every one of you listening to this episode are destined to be a world-class CISO. Here's the only question. The only question is, do you choose to accept it? Do you choose to own it? Do you choose to become a world-class CISO? Because the reality is everybody is destined to be a world-class CISO. Everyone is meant to be a world-class CISO. Everyone can be a world-class CISO. But few actually choose to decide. And most either stay average CISO, or the saddest thing in my opinion is somebody who doesn't truly believe in their capabilities and they never even become a CISO when it's something they want and something they desire. So you need to, first and foremost, you can listen to all these episodes. You can do everything I say. I believe in you. I know you can do it, but ultimately at the end of the day, that is not enough. You have to believe in yourself. You have to know that you are fully capable of being a world-class CISO. And when you believe it, you own it, and you start showing up as a world-class CISO, that, my friends, is when everything starts shifting for you. So that's actually not the intent of this episode. I just always like giving a little motivational intro because I tell you more and more of my coaching clients, more and more of my one-on-one clients, more and more of my executive clients, where the executive team, typically the CEO or the director of the board, brings me in and says, listen, we've invested a lot of time, energy, and effort in our CISO, and they are just not getting it. They're not stepping up, and we really don't want to get rid of them, but they need some help and some coaching. Can you help and assist them? And 8 times out of 10, it's not the strategy, it's not the strategic, it's the mindset piece. They just don't see themselves, they don't believe, they create these false narratives. Oh, no one on the team respects me. I'm like, dude, the board of directors for a multi-billion-dollar company who could fire you in a second and bring on any CISO they want on the planet believes in you, invested in you, and hired me at no cheap rate to come in and assist you. And you're going to believe that story, that they don't care about you, that they don't believe in you, that they don't think you're capable of doing it. The reality is, in most cases, they believe in you more than you do. So we got a choice. We can either get you to believe in yourself and see what I see what they see what everyone else sees, or unfortunately, you're probably not going to be around in 6 months. So let's make this happen. And most of the time, I can get them to see their greatness, step into their greatness, and become their greatness. And the funny thing about it is, it was there all the time. I just had to show it to them. I just had to get them to believe and step up and own it. It's sort of like that scene in The Lion King where Simba, when he runs away from home and he basically is hanging out with whatever those two other animals are, I don't even know, but they're not lions, and he actually believes he's one of them. And then he goes by a puddle and he looks in that puddle and he sees his reflection. And it's like this light goes on going, I'm actually a lion. Remember, he never looked in the mirror. He never saw himself. He just assumed who he was hanging out with was who he was. And when he had that moment, that revelation that I am truly a lion, everything shifted, right? That's the key part in the movie where it's like, dun, 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 right? They play all the music and everything shifts. So that's the key part in your life. I want to tune up the orchestra, right? Dun, 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 right? When you look and realize that you are a world-class CISO. So own it, believe it. I do have other episodes, so if you're new to this podcast, I think I'm up to like 140 episodes. And there's been many on mindset and others. I'll probably do one in a few because I'm due. I feel the calling, right, coming back. So I'll probably do another one in a couple episodes. But we have plenty that you can go back and listen to. But today is about a different topic. Today is about what is the problem you're trying to solve. And once again, these episodes are based off of themes, life experience, what I see coming up. It's sort of always funny where it seems like all of my clients always have the same issue or the same challenge at the same time. It's like all of a sudden this week, every one of my clients had this issue where they would all come to me to be like, Eric, there's this new technology that came out that does behavioral analytics with advanced AI and correlation of threat data in order to be able to interpret and verify and validate new advanced threats and blah, blah, blah. It's like, should we buy it? And my response back is, well, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And they sort of look at me like, but Eric, didn't you hear me? This is like the coolest technology ever invented. Like this is advanced, detailed, and they go back into the thing and I'm like, oh, I heard you. It's super cool. But I'm going to go back to my question. What is the problem you're trying to solve? Well, let me put it in another context. What is the risk you're trying to reduce? What is the risk that is such a problem in your organization that we need this solution in order to reduce it? And I'll just be honest with you. The sole reason why I didn't call this reducing risk or the real risk reduction is because I've done several episodes on risk, so I didn't want you to think I'm repeating myself. So I just gave it a different title. But the problem is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? What is the risk you're trying to reduce? All come back to the same exact thing. And this is where Chief Information Security Officers go back to their techie roots. Techies love technology. They love solutions. They love these crazy things. So like vendors, and I used to work for a lot of vendors and help build out different solutions in some of my past lives. Right? I always joke I'm a cat. Right? I have 9 lives. I probably have like 30 lives at this point. But right, you always got to come back with new lives. Right? So it's not just cats that have 9 lives. Humans have different lives you can keep living too. But that's a whole nother episode and a whole nother story. So we won't go there today. But the point is, in a different life, I work for vendors, and I will tell you, I love security engineers because if you call them up and you tell them about some crazy new technology that solves a problem, they'd always meet with you because that's what they loved and that's what they were fascinated. And I also knew the trick, because I did it too, and I'm a victim of this, that if you could get a techie excited enough about a product, especially if they're a well-respected senior security engineer or chief scientist at a large billion-dollar company, you can get them excited enough about a tech, there's a good probability they could convince their executives to buy that tech and put that tech in their environment. And this is the problem that we have with most of our clients. When I go in and we do assessments today, it's pretty much, I see the same thing over and over again, where you have an environment where there is too much tech and not enough people. So there's all this technology, and in many cases, it's still in boxes. So I go and I'm like, do you have a DLP, data loss prevention solution? And in the past, we would just ask those questions. Do you have a DLP? Do you have a firewall? Do you have behavioral analytics? Do you have a SIM solution? And the problem is they would go in and go, yes, yes, yes. Awesome. Now I've learned, because I know how companies operate, is I now have to go, okay, do you have a SIM solution? Yes. Is it set up and running on your network? No. Is it still in the box? Yes. Awesome. All right, because the problem is companies buy all the tech, but they don't realize there's a cost. There's a cost to actually running, implementing, and doing it, and they don't take that into account. It's the whole capital expense versus operational expense. Right? Capital expense is buying stuff. That's easy. In many companies, you can get some CapEx. If you need a couple $100K to buy something, usually if there's enough trust or justification, you can get it done. The problem is OpEx is people, hiring, bodies, and that is super duper hard. And I see this all the time. I was being interviewed and I said, what's the number one problem companies make when they have an incident or a breach? And everyone else on the panel was talking about, oh, they either don't pay the ransom or they don't include this or they don't. And my thing was, after the incident is over, the biggest issue is the way the company solves the problem is by writing a check. In almost every incident, after there's a breach, after there's a compromise, basically the executive team will look at the security team and say, okay, how much do you want? All right? And they're like, okay, 500, and they'll write them a check. It's the funniest thing. If you want money before a breach, almost impossible. After a breach, you can almost always get the money. Because the executives team's logic is, if I give them money and this happens again, it's their fault, not mine. To put it in a more blunt, fundamental way, if this happens again and me as a CEO does not show that I took measures to minimize this, I get fired. So in order for me not to get fired and for the CISO to get fired, I'm going to write a really big check. So this way, if it happens again or we have another breach, I can go back with a straight face to the board of directors and say, I wrote a check, I gave them the resources, I gave them the money, I gave them everything they needed, their fault, not mine, fire them, let's hire a new CISO. And the unfortunate reality is that happens. Why? What is almost always the trade book? The playbook for when an incident happens. Almost always the CISO gets fired because somebody's got to take the blame. Now here's the problem. In almost all incidents that I work, the problem wasn't lack of technology. In almost every incident I've worked, when I go back and I look at the security that was in place, and I go back and I scour through the alerts and the incidents and the data and the information, I almost always find indication of the attack. The current technology detected the attack. Problem? There wasn't enough people to respond. There wasn't enough people to react. So typical problem. You have security technology that's generating 500 alerts a day. Problem. Your security team is overworked, diversified, pulled in other directions, not focused primarily on security, always have other fires, and they can only handle 50 alerts a day. If your technology is generating 500 alerts and you can only handle 50, that means 450 get ignored a day. Do the math. Not pretty. Which means the probability of you actually catching, seeing, and responding to real attacks is slim to none. So the issue has nothing to do with the tech. It has to do with not enough people responding, handling, or tuning the tech. So check this out. You had an incident or you had a breach because you didn't have enough resources to handle the alerts. You had 500 alerts and you could only handle 50. So the company's solution to this problem is, let's buy more tech. So now, instead of 500 alerts, we generate 2,000 alerts. So now, instead of us handling 50 alerts out of 500, now we're only handling 50 alerts out of 2,000. So it's actually the most, backwards approach to solving the problem. And that's what I always tell our clients. I'm like, if you're not giving them more people, don't buy more tech. Because all you're doing is making the problem worse. If you put more tech in and generate more alerts and you don't have more people or more response or more tuning, you're making the problem worse, not better. So the problem in most situations, in most cases, is not enough people or the tech not tuned based on the number of people you have in place. What's the correct solution? The correct solution is, if you have an incident because you had 500 alerts and your team can only handle 50, there's really only two options. Option one, hire more people. Increase your headcount and hire more people. Option two is tune the tech to only generate 50 alerts a day, and those are the highest, most critical alerts that your team has to handle. Those are really your only two options. Anything else is delusional or is misleading and creating a worse problem, not a better problem. So I urge you, as a CISO or as a security engineer, be very careful before you buy more tech. Be very careful before you bring in more devices that generate more alerts on the system. And always go back and ask yourself, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Or better yet, what is the risk we're trying to reduce? And then the question is this: is this the best possible way to reduce the risk? Other thing that's very critical for a CISO to keep in mind: how much manual effort does the solution require? And here's the reality. Automated solutions are the best. Automated solutions that automatically go in, prevent, or react, respond, and stop an attack in motion are absolutely the best. Here's the problem. They also are the least secure. And here's why. If I have an automated solution, a solution that's going to go in and prevent all attacks, it will automatically stop attacks, or it will automatically take action and block an attack. Those cases must have 0 false positives. They have to be 100% accurate 100% of the time, which makes these types of solutions very, very difficult and very hard to come by. Because here's the reality. If there's a solution, I don't care how good is it, how advanced it is, how much behavioral analytics and AI it uses, if it blocks legitimate traffic, it's not going to be effective in an organization. Companies are not going to tolerate, in the name of security, in order to protect and secure the enterprise, we are willing to block 10% of legitimate customers. We are willing to block 10% of legitimate revenue. We are able to block 10% of legitimate communication. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. So the problem we have is any preventive or automated solution that's going to take action without any human intervention must be 100% accurate 100% of the time. Now, yes, there are some attacks that fit under that category. But here's the problem. Most of the advanced attacks, most of the high-end attacks, most of the really really tricky attacks, when you're looking at analyzing and tracking, are bad or malicious 80% of the time. Now, if something is bad 80% of the time, that means, I know you were like, I didn't know I signed up for advanced math. I'll work with you here. If something is bad 80% of the time, then that means it is good 20% of the time. Which means if you are blocking something that is bad 80% of the time, you're stopping 20% legitimate traffic. You're stopping 20% of legitimate activity on the network, which is not and will not be acceptable under any possible circumstance. So that's where we get into the other challenge or issue, is most really good, really advanced, really powerful security solutions at some level require some manual effort. They require some manual intervention. So now we get into this challenge where, okay, we can get a fully automated solution that only stops some of the attacks, or we can get a partially automated but manual solution that stops the really, really advanced attacks but requires human intervention in order for that to happen and in order for that to occur. So that's what I call the CISO dilemma, where how do you go in and find that balance? How do you go in and say, okay, we want a solution that works and works very, very effectively, but also doesn't require a lot of human intervention, and that's sometimes trying to fit the 5 gallons of water into a 1 gallon bucket. It just doesn't always work. So that's where the work comes in. That's why a CISO gets paid big dollars, is you need to go in and figure out where's the right balance. We have a risk, and by the way, let me pause for a second. We started off this discussion with what is the problem you're trying to solve. But I just want to be clear. That is the wrong way to start a discussion. You should never be having a vendor come in and give you a solution that you think is super cool and halfway through say, well, what is the problem? What is the risk you actually reduce? Because here's the reality. If you didn't already determine that you have an unacceptable risk, and you didn't already determine that this solution is the best way to reduce the risk, why are you wasting your time? Why are you meeting with the vendor? A CISO should not be spending time learning about cool products. Now, and this is where we get into, are you really a CISO? If you love meeting with vendors and finding out about cool products and cool solutions, even if you don't actually have a risk in your organization that doesn't actually solve a problem, but you love finding out and getting into the details and learning the tech and seeing how it works, you're not really a CISO. You're a security engineer. Security engineers should periodically meet with vendors. When I coach organizations or I come in to large cybersecurity teams, yes, I encourage the security engineers to be up to speed on the different solutions. They should be up to speed on the different tech. They should be up to speed on what is out there, what is good, what is the best, and what is current state of the art when it comes to cybersecurity. Security engineers, yes. CISOs, no. Why? Because here's what happens. If I'm a CISO and I have a team of 15 security engineers, when we get to a situation where I've identified a high risk, an unacceptable risk to the organization, and me and the executive team has decided this is not acceptable. This risk is not acceptable. It puts the organization in way too much of a financial risk or exposure, and therefore we need to fix it. We found a problem that needs to be solved. We found a risk that needs to be removed or reduced. When that happens, I want to be able to go to my security team and say, okay, we just deployed a new system. There's a new risk to our organization that is completely and totally unacceptable. What solutions do you know about that fit this and are the best way to reduce this risk? And I want my security engineers to know. I don't want them to go, oh, we got to research it, or we got to spend 4 months, or we got to talk to vendors, or we got to figure it out. No, I expect they did that already. I expect they are tracking new tech. They are meeting with vendors. They are staying up to speed on what's happening. So when I have a problem as a CISO, they already have the solution. Security engineers should be staying up on tech. CISOs should not. So that's another one of those. Are you really a CISO? Do you really want to be a CISO? Are you really thinking and acting like a CISO? Technology is a tactical solution, which is what security engineers do. CISOs are strategic, which is all risk-based. If there's not an unacceptable risk, if there's not a major problem, I don't care about it as a CISO. My security team, let them be proactive. Let them stay up to speed on it. But as soon as I identify an unacceptable risk, as soon as I identify a problem that has to be fixed, my security engineers should be able to provide guidance. They should be able to provide solutions. They should have already met with the vendors and know what the options are and what's currently in place. So we always want to, as a CISO, be driven by what is and what is not acceptable risk. And just sort of summarizing a few of our previous podcasts, just putting it all together for you. The number one thing a CISO or a new CISO should do. If you ask me, and I get this asked all the time on panels and interviews and discussions, Eric, when a new CISO comes into an organization, what is one of the first things they should do? There's many things in that category, but to me, one of the first things they need to do is get agreement from the executive team on a risk posture. What is the current risk posture at our organization? What risks are we willing to accept? And what risk are we not willing to accept? Because the reality is simple. You're not going to be able to accept all risk. You're going to have to accept some risk. 100% security doesn't exist. So the reality is, if your organization isn't clear on what is and what is not acceptable risk, then you're basically going to be fighting a losing battle. You're not going to win. You can't win a battle that people think doesn't exist. If your executive team says, we have zero tolerance for risk, there should be zero cybersecurity risk in our organization, we should never, ever get breached or compromised, you should never have taken that job. You should have brought that up during the interview. You should have made it crystal clear, but that is chasing unicorns. They don't, well, my friend Bubbles does exist. I do have a pet unicorn, so we don't want to get our imaginary friends upset here, but in any real world, right, example, you don't have unicorns, right? You can't chase imaginary things. If your executive team truly believes that you should have zero risk of chasing unicorns, and guess what? You might as well quit or start looking for another job because you're going to get fired. Because if they think that zero risk is what they want, you know it's not feasible, you know you're going to get compromised, and you know you're going to get fired. So you might as well start looking for another job. So the reality is you have to get very clear on what is acceptable risk. Have to get clear. Then, once you know what is and what is not acceptable risk, then your job as a CISO is to find what is above the line, to find what things are unacceptable. What risks are we currently ignoring, not dealing with, and not addressing that could have a significant impact to our organization and are above the acceptable risk? Then you start focusing in and going after those risks. Other thing, before you buy anything new, you should inventory and say, what do we currently have? I've seen this, and this just like boggles my mind at levels that I didn't think were possible. I have organizations that go in and they spend $400K on a SIM solution. When I kid you not, there is already a SIM solution that was purchased a year ago before they came on board as a CISO that is still sitting in a box because nobody had time to set it up. and I look at them, are you kidding me? You have an existing SIM that's as close to as good as the one you purchased. They're one and the same. I mean, maybe you like this vendor better, but it's not like they're different products. They're basically comparable price points. So you have a comparable product that your predecessor purchased a year ago that would solve a similar problem and reduce the risk to an acceptable level that nobody was able to set up or configure, and you went and purchased another one? That's crazy. Clearly, it's not a resource issue. You already have one. It's a people problem. So buying another one doesn't solve the issue because you are not dealing with product problems. You're dealing with not having enough resources to set it up. So make sure as a CISO, you're always doing your homework. Make sure you know what you purchased. Make sure you recognize, are we using what we purchased? And then always, before you spend $1 of your budget or an hour of your time, always go back and say, what is the risk we're reducing? Or what is the problem we're trying to solve?